We'll go ahead and call the September 25th Planning and Zoning Commission meeting to order. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. All right, item 3 on the agenda. Oh, item 2, roll call.
Yes. Commissioner Kent?
Here.
Commissioner Jennings? Here. Commissioner McLeod?
Here.
Chair Waddy?
Here. That brings us to item 3 on the agenda. Are there any ex parte communications on behalf of the commission?
None.
All right, seeing none, we'll move on to item 4 on the agenda. That's the consent calendar. Consent calendar items are considered routine and will be acted on by one motion. Tonight we have one item, that's item 4-1, and that is the Planning and Zoning Commission meeting minutes from September 11th. Anyone have any objections?
There was one comment I made, which I've learned later, illuminated my comment, and I wanted to change it. Can you do that, or is it? It was just minor. It was on the request for bigger trees along the.
Are you wanting to clarify the comment that you made?
Yeah, I think. Well, I want to change it actually because I've learned it's just too many. Well, okay. Let me jump to it. Let's pull it off the agenda and I'll talk about it.
Okay. We will go ahead and then pull item 4-1 off the agenda. I don't think we need a staff presentation, so why don't we just go ahead?
Okay. So just my comment on. Let me dig up the my notes here. So it had to do with the Curtis, not the Portland Canes project, and I mentioned I thought the trees were undersized and they could be bigger because the planting zone was bigger. I didn't realize at the time that there are a bunch of overhead electrical lines that are really keeping those trees small. So I take that back. The trees are fine. That's all.
Was that on page, just to clarify, page 3?
It's on page 6.
Oh, page 6.
Towards the bottom.
Okay, noted.
And staff procedurally, how would you like us to enact that? Can you guys just make that change, or do we need to make a motion?
Oh, we can make the change.
Okay, great. With that change then, would you like to make a motion to adopt those minutes?
Sure. I'll make a motion to adopt the minutes with the change just mentioned.
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Seeing no opposed, that item passes 4-0.
Sorry, just to clarify, I was abstaining just because I wasn't here for the meeting.
Got it. So 3-0, that item passes. All right, moving on to item 5, that's public comment. Are there any members of the public who would like to address the commission on an item not otherwise on today's agenda? If so, and please just make sure to fill out a speaker card when you're done. And you have 3 minutes to speak.
That's exactly what I'm going to talk about. I watched the last meeting of the commission, in particular the discussion of the Canes and Portland townhouse project, which grew very tense and uncomfortable. I think a lot of that tension derives from the fact that you allow very little time for speakers to provide their comments. The city's become very enamored with the 3-minute rule. We apply it whether there's 1 speaker or 2 speakers or a larger number. I don't think that's even legal. I think if you look at the Brown Act includes language that authorizes the legislative body to set time limits, but that authority is based on the need to allow every member of the public to speak. That's an easy goal to reach with 1 speaker or 2 speakers, right? So I would encourage and in 1992, the AG provided an opinion on that portion of the Brown Act, and he came up with 5 minutes as a reasonable time limit. And he basically, so I think that the message here is that what might be reasonable for 20 speakers may not be reasonable for a smaller number. So I think the city should adopt, actually I think you have language which is so vaguely written that you could do it automatically. It refers to a 3-minute or whatever time the chair decides. But I think you probably need a procedure, and I think you need to have a sliding scale which provides more time for those occasions when there's only 1 or 2 speakers. Thanks.
Thank you, appreciate your comment. Do we have any other folks here for general public comment? Great, seeing none, public comment is closed. That'll take us to item 6 On our agenda, discussion and possible action, we have one item, and that is item 6-1. This is planning application 19-036, design review for a two-level addition at 1036 Ramona Avenue.
Yes, good evening, Commission. Once again, before you tonight is the design review for a second-story addition at 1036 Ramona. We'll do a quick presentation. We can answer questions at the end. Some quick background on the property. The subject property is a 35-foot wide by 120-foot lot with a 3-bedroom, 1-bathroom, 1,061 square foot house built in 1928. City records show minor work done to the property. The project was last reviewed by the Planning and Zoning Commission on the June 26th hearing. The commission expressed concerns with the lack of integration the proposed design had with the existing architecture of the home, the cantilevered portion of the home proposed at the rear, the proposed building materials, the lack of a landscape plan, the removal of the true divided light windows at the front of the building, the proposed window language and pattern in general, and the second-story addition being flush with the existing ground level, in addition to the complexity of the proposed roof plan / design. Here's a street view of the property as it sits today. Project requests. The applicant is seeking design review approval for a 1,199 square foot second-story addition to the home. The project scope includes interior reprogramming and remodeling. The first floor is proposed to accommodate the kitchen, bathroom area, breakfast area, dining room, half bath, and living room. The second floor is proposed to accommodate 4 bedrooms, 3 bathrooms, and a laundry area. This overall project scope will result in a 4-bedroom, 3.5 bathroom, 2,157 square foot home with a maximum height of 27 feet 2 inches. Here's the existing front elevation. Here's what was previously proposed at the last Planning and Zoning Commission hearing. And this is what's proposed for you tonight, the front elevation of 1036 Ramona. Here is the proposed south elevation before you tonight, north, and lastly, the rear of the building. Exceptional design. Projects which exceed a 0.45 floor area ratio are subject to exceptional design review as reviewed by the Planning and Zoning Commission. Exceptional design treatments include horizontal and vertical wood siding on the exterior for the exterior cladding material, attic vent detailing, preservation of the original ground level facade, front and rear porches, skylights, and landscaping improvements. Since the commission last saw this project, the project architect has made the following modifications to the project, which includes an expansion to the rear deck on the ground floor. The second story has been recessed 3 foot 11 inches from the ground floor of the existing building face, and thus the lower level of the facade has been relatively preserved. Wood siding is now proposed to match the original siding material of the home. 4-inch wood panels in a horizontal orientation in addition to 8-inch vertical wood panels at the gable ends. True divided light windows are proposed throughout the home. A projection on the south side of the home is proposed on the second-story addition. And squared-off arts and craft columns are now proposed at the rear porch. Additionally, the architect has provided a landscape plan indicating improvements, majority towards the front portion of the property. Parking. There's an existing 427 square foot detached original carriage structure with an attic at the rear of the property. This structure is proposed to remain. Additional off-street parking can be accommodated on the existing driveway. No additional off-street parking requirements are triggered with this project scope. Staff has not received any formal correspondences on this project before you tonight. The project is categorically exempt from CEQA. And recommendation, staff recommends that the Planning and Zoning Commission review the proposed project and provide feedback to the applicant and staff. Draft findings and conditions of approval are included should the commission move to take action. And with that, we're happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions of the commission for staff?
No.
I was just curious, since I know you're recommending that we review and provide feedback a second time, rather than making a recommendation to approve tonight, I'm just curious if there was anything that staff was focused on in particular that, prevented you from actually recommending approval.
I would say majority of the comments have been addressed. There are a few, like with the cantilevered portion of the rear of the home. Mm-hmm. I think some comments were brought up by a member of the public regarding the original roof pitch too. And so we just wanted to have the commission kind of chime in and see if those have been met.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, that's it. We'll go ahead and then turn it over to the project applicant if you would like to provide a brief presentation.
Good evening. My name is Tom Jan, the project architect for this project. As Mr. Tan mentioned, so this revision is fully focused on responding to the feedbacks and comments from last meeting. So basically, the last meeting, the commissioners pretty much agree with the internal reprogramming of the house and make the house more functional and more livable. The comments mostly focus on the roof, how to preserve the frontage of the original house, and improve the landscaping in front of the house. So based on that, we address the comments to how to preserve the character of the house by moving back the second floor to keep the existing front facade and the bay window intact. Basically, we are going to improve it by repairing and fixing anything is needed. And the window also is going to be upgraded in the bay window with more energy efficient, but will retain the same style with wood inside and then aluminum clad outside for low maintenance. The rest of the windows throughout the house will match the original style with some true divided lights. We also changed the finish of all exterior walls to wood siding to also go with the front facade, because the previous design proposal is to have the new area, wall area with cement siding, even though the style match, but we think that with wood siding it will be more authentic to maintain the characters. We also, I mentioned about the windows and doors, so we are going to keep it high quality and more functional and for better ventilations. We also, the main revision is to simplify the roof line. Last design, we have some small gables on both sides. And I think some comments are focusing on the on how to simplify the roof. So this one, so by putting back the second story, so we maintain, we managed to do a single gable, so it's more in line with the neighborhood. I think Chris just mentioned about the pitch roof, and I think as the first intention is to keep the roof height as low as possible, try to not to increase the height and mass. So if the commissioner thing is necessary to change the roof pitch to match the existing, so we can do it as a conditional approval to go with that. For the cantilever at the back, we eliminate the bay window at the back. So we just have a little bit cantilever on the left-hand side to make the bedroom, the two small bedrooms, more livable, because they have children and they have grandparents located at the front. So the master will be at the back. So two small bedrooms, if without the cantilever, it would be too small. So yeah, overall, we try to design this house more functional, more appealing, and change the quality of the house to enhance the beauty of the neighborhood. Thank you for your listening and support.
Thank you. Are there any questions of the architect?
No,
Great, thank you.
no.
All right, we will now open it up for public comment. Are there any speakers here who wish to speak as part of this project? Would you like to speak? Okay. If you can come up and speak, and then please fill out a speaker card. Just.
Oh, perfect.
Hello. I'm not sure if this is actually an appropriate question for this kind of meeting. This is the first meeting I've been to. I live next door at 1034 Ramona, and I don't have a problem with the design. It'll make our yard a little more overlooked, but that's fine. My concern was just to find out some more about how the demolition would work. I'm pregnant, and I was a little concerned about a full demolition happening and then lead paint being available in the area. There was a study recent. I have the dual paranoia of being a pregnant person and also working for a scientific research journal. So a paper came out recently showing that after a home demolition, lead paint could be found like 400 feet away. We're sort of 12 feet away. So I was just wondering, the commission probably deals with this stuff all the time, if you could provide some more information, or if that's information I should get from my neighbors. But that was my question, basically. Thanks.
Staff, do you want to provide an answer?
Sure. So, yeah, of course. We do have standard conditions of approval that are attached to every project that comes through the Planning and Zoning Commission. And of those conditions, there are certain sort of site conditions that have to be satisfied. There's mitigation requirements for the removal of lead paint and that sort of thing that are actually set federally, so they do have to be followed as part of this project. Yep.
But yes, that's what you're supposed to do. But keep an eye on the contractors. Somebody might come in and I don't know if there's lead on that building, but if they come in, most likely. So they might power wash it, and that would cause a lot of spread of the stuff. You know, I'm not sure who you're hiring, but state law says they're not supposed to do that, but it happens more often than you'd like.
I have experience with this. There are KALB requirements and national requirements. Whoever does the demolition needs to be lead certified. Anybody who works on that siding, I guarantee you there's lead paint on that building. There are measures you have to take, putting plastic down 10 feet away, rolling it up at the end of the day, throwing it away. Not allowed to grind or sand or create any kind of dust. They are allowed to use power tools with vacuum attachments, but I think generally they are going to eliminate, maybe this is a question the architect could answer, but I think they're going to eliminate all of the existing siding except the front wall. Is that true? So when they take that off, they should not be creating much dust, but they will be dropping paint chips into the ground, and that needs to be protected against, and there are very specific guidelines for that. And there should not be any sanding or grinding or cutting of that wood, which would raise dust. Dust is the big problem for drifting. And there are other ways you can help deal with that. I don't know, sometimes you can put up at least screens and things at the fence lines, sort of a mesh netting sometimes goes up. I've seen that. So. And I would, again, like my fellow commissioner says, if you see anything, dust flying around, you can call the building department. I mean, they're on notice. They need to protect you and protect themselves, actually. There's strict rules for how the workers are dressed and what they do and how they wash their hands and everything. So there's a lot to it. So.
Yeah,
In theory, you're protected, but they have to do the right thing. So,
Very close, and it's
yeah.
I'm from the UK, and so it's all brick. There's less knocking things down.
Yeah.
And Albany's very responsive, but the county is super responsive on that lead issue. They'll respond within hours. I think there's a lead hotline or something in the county that you can call. So, yeah.
Great. It looks like there are no other members of the public who are here wishing to speak. All right, seeing none, then public comment will be closed, and we will turn it back to the commission for deliberations.
Well, I think it's a great improvement. I like the not trying to extend that bay all the way up, keeping it to its original form. I think was a good move. So I think I'm satisfied with the building shape. The landscape plan is really fleshed out nicely. I think it's a nice plan. There was one, I think it's a typo that I just wanted to correct because it could be a major issue. On the rear of the lot, she says, your designer mentioned Prosperum undulatum, which is actually a pretty big tree, 40 feet. I think she meant Eugenioides, which is kind of a screen, because her variety is it's a variated form, which Eugenioides comes in a variated form. So I think she meant Eugenioides, not undulatum. So.
So I appreciate the applicant's efforts to address the comments that we had the last time, and it does appear that you took most of, if not absolutely every one of those into consideration. I also like the preservation of the existing facade. The addition, I guess I wish it was stepped back a little bit more or softened somewhat, but overall I think it's, it's a nice design, and it is much simplified from what you had the last time. So I don't think I have any real substantive comments, and depending on what fellow commissioners have to offer, I would be comfortable moving forward with a recommendation to approve tonight.
It's my first time seeing this project, so I wasn't able to provide feedback last time. I like preserving the front gable. I think that helps. And the two different pitch lines bother me a little bit for the gables, but I don't think it's something that I would, insist changes. One thing that does bother me about this facade is the small gable for the entryway. I have been looking at this, trying to figure out some other way that could be done, because I don't really like the way it is jammed into the other part of that structure. I guess the comments earlier, or the intent was to preserve the gable and that bay window, and now we have this other element kind of jamming into it, and I don't see how that works very well. I would like to see that front smaller gable redesigned so that somehow the original gable and bay window was more of a standalone object or standalone piece. I was looking at your plan. I couldn't really just come up with an ad hoc way to do that, but it seems like it's just an unfortunate intersection of three roofs right there. And I don't like the way it overlaps the bay window, especially. So that's one comment. But overall, I do appreciate your willingness to work with the commission and your efforts. Could we look at the floor plan? I guess by, you're going to have some structural engineering challenges. I do like the open plan. I think it's, it's very appropriate to change it that way. But you have created, or it will be, a soft story. And you're going to have a very challenging time resisting all those transverse spaces with no walls, basically, seismically. And I think you're going to have some steel moment frames or something, and then you're going to have them right over windows and doors. And if you look at the back cantilever, I think you're also going to have a big seismic challenge there. The back porch, as a covered porch, it may be a very pleasant place to sit and eat. I don't really have a problem with it per se, but, and this is more of your engineering building permit problem, but I don't think your two little columns out there are quite going to work, because I could imagine 6-inch or 6-inch steel columns being required there or something with the big beam across to resist the lateral movement, even if it's cantilevered. Anyway, that is going to be your building permit structural engineering challenge. But overall, I think it's an appropriate sized house for Albany, for the lot. I don't really have any other, no other real concerns. The windows, I like your windows. You create a nice pattern on the outside. Fairly good rhythm. I mean, everything, almost the same window everywhere, which does give it a certain regularity and a certain calmness, I think, in a way. So I think that's good. My only thing is, well, when I design, I push my windows more to the corners, so you let daylight in on each side and not so much right in the middle. You kind of create dark corners that way, but that's more a question of livability. I don't know if that's really something I would insist changes, but the only thing that does bother me really is that front gable and how it intersects with the other forms of the existing gable, which seemed to be what was driving a lot of the discussion last time. So in that sense, I would defer to my other commissioners as to how to move forward on that. But and then the 3-lap, I think it's 3-lap siding, not 4-inch siding. It's sort of 3 teardrops, if I'm not mistaken from the photograph. And then the only other element of discussion would be that I don't think wood is strictly speaking necessary. I think you can get the same look with fiber cement board, and in a lot of ways I prefer fiber cement board. I don't know if you can get it in the existing siding pattern, but I know you can get it in the 8-inch pattern, a V rustic or something, not just the shiplap fiber cement, but you could get the pattern, you know, a traditional pattern, and the same thickness and size as traditional wood siding. And the problem with wood siding now is that, you know, back when that house was built, it was probably built with old growth redwood siding, and that lasts 100 years. But what we get now is usually finger jointed, glued together wood, and it does not last that long. And in that sense, I prefer fiber cement board where you can use it and maintain the same look, because as you noted in your earlier application, it is fire resistant, it is rot resistant. So in a sense, it's much more resilient, it will last much longer, and it actually paints better and I think looks better. So in that sense, I would just say, as long as they match the same look and feel, that kind of underlying material should be flexible. I would suggest that. Okay, thank you.
Well, sure, and I'll just kind of ping off of that a little bit. I think I recall from the last conversation, or the last session that we had, there was a lot of conversation about really trying to preserve those original materials on the original portion, but sort of acknowledging that for the new construction portion, like hardy and aluminum clad wood windows would be appropriate. So my general thoughts first are thank you. I do feel like you guys have made tremendous improvement on the design from where we were at the last meeting. And I really, you know, like the fact that you've kind of regularized your window pattern. You've really let that original front facade of the building be retained, and you're no longer like lifting the building, all of that. I think I think there really is a lot of improvement in the use of high quality materials. So wanted to thank you for that. I do still share a couple of those items that some of my commissioners shared about, I'll start. So I agree with the porch. And I think kind of what I'm struggling with here a little bit is I still feel like although I think the design, if this was just a new construction on a vacant lot, I think many of these issues would be a little less. But to me, I think a big part of what we were talking about last time was somehow getting to sort of acknowledge and really note sort of that the original building and the volume of that original building a little bit more. And I feel like right now it's kind of being swallowed up by this larger building. And so it feels a little bit tokenistic to me right now. And then the porch being added on, I think really changes sort of that feel of that original building there, and kind of, I don't know, it is competing a lot with that original sort of small scale and narrow width. And then similarly on the vertical addition, I had really hoped that maybe the vertical addition was set back a little farther. I think I had mentioned previously to sort of cite the vertical addition around roughly where the cross gable of the existing roof form is. I do understand that you guys are trying to get 4 bedrooms and 3 bathrooms up there, which you know, I think with the bedrooms and the bathroom sizes and the closets that are sized right now, you know, 4 beds and 3 full bathrooms with, you know, full tubs and all of that might be challenging with a greater setback, but I do think there could be at least a little tightening up of the floor plan to at least give a little bit greater setback and maybe modify the roof form as part of that, because it looks like right now that the ceilings aren't actually vaulted in any way, so the gable really is tacked on, so that extra height isn't necessarily bringing living space within the units, it's just purely architectural in nature. And so, I mean, some of the thoughts that I had was, could you even drop down the side walls to maybe be knee walls, add in, you know, lower the overall height, put in gables and some dormers instead if you needed to in some discrete areas that are actual proper roof dormers rather than sort of a side cantilever. I feel like there might be other ways where you can, you could get that volume in, but still kind of hug on to that original building a little bit more. On the flip side, and this is, I guess, what I've been struggling with, is I actually last night went back and read sort of all of the city's residential design guidelines, kind of looking for something that talked about, you know, either scale of the street or existing structures, and there really doesn't seem to be anything from sort of a regulatory perspective that to like hang our hat on this preservation of existing building forms. And I think that's a little bit of my internal struggle, as sort of the professional side of me really wants to retain that, but I don't see that described so much in our design guidelines. And so that's sort of the internal struggle I'm having right now. I personally feel like we're really, really close on this one. And so I'm a little torn on whether to ask for a continuance and a couple more tweaks that I think could really make this an exceptional design. I feel like right now if this wasn't over the FAR, I think I would be totally fine saying this like meets the standards. I think getting it over that edge to exceptional design is where I'm still having a little bit of a struggle of thinking there are a couple of tweaks that could be made to really make this what we call an exceptional design. And those would be either bringing the massing down a little bit and including some major changes to that upper floor roof form, or pushing it back a couple feet more, and then some changes to the front porch so that it isn't really competing with that front facade that we were really trying to have standalone. So I think those would be the primary 3 things that I would point to. And then, yeah, I don't know. Those were my thoughts.
I'm curious whether you would be open to seeing if the architect has a response to any of those comments. I mean, I'm just, because I think those are all, you know, I agree with the intent of your design comments, but also the sort of question about imposing things that may or may not really be requirements under the city's design guidelines. Anyway, I'm just curious if the architect has a response to any of that feedback.
Yeah, at the same time, it's not a historical structure, right? And we don't have a historical preservation ordinance. So some way this is our style preference or something like that, I don't know. You know, and I appreciate trying to save the front part, and they did make a good faith effort to move the front back. I think if they shrink it or do those sort of low walls, I think it would make the upper floor really, really hard to make it livable to the extent that you would need to make the number of bedrooms. And I don't think the house is too big. So.
When you say push something back, what were you talking about?
Oh, they pushed the upper floor back from the front.
Oh, yeah, right, okay.
Plane.
But you're not talking about pushing it more back.
I'm not suggesting that. You know, in a way, it makes a reasonable-sized bay window and a little extension on the front, if you look at it in plan. If you push the side, well, I don't know. Well, you know, it's basically a bay window seating area. And if you push the upper floor back, you start really impeding their ability to create the bedrooms, and
I think
thing could slide back at the back, but then it's overhanging more. I don't know. It's sort of a trade-off.
Well, the idea about the porch in kind of imposing itself over that historic bay window, I guess you call it. What if you just push that back? I mean, it seems like the porch is rather long.
Well, in a way, I would like to see the gable and the bay window, the original one, as its own standalone element. And it would be nice if the porch were recessed from that, I think.
Right, so.
Right, yeah,
And I
right.
guess the reason that I mentioned asking if the architect, and you don't have to come back up, but I thought it would be helpful to hear the response on that, because I think, you know, I tend to agree that that would be a preferable design, and if you have some thoughts about whether that's something that would be easy to accommodate, it would be helpful for me to know. Would you mind? Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for your comments. Actually, that's the biggest challenge during the design process. When we try to preserve the front, and then we also have an intention that as one of the big improvement to bring the entrance to the front to show the welcoming gesture to the street. So we decided to have some element which is probably not as big as the main, but to pop up a little bit. And so we have tried different options. One is to change it from the same gable to a pitch roof so that it won't compete that much. The other is we don't stick out too much and then have just a column there, but it would look very plain. And so right now we have some kind of rhythms, so do, re, mi. So the main part of the house is more prominent, and then the preserved one, so even though it's in the middle size, but it sticks out about 4 feet. So, and then this one stands out just like reaching out to a guest or the homeowner for the welcoming home. So one way to do it, I think, I do agree that how to make it more, not that much competing is to push it back a little bit more, because right now we have a long porch, so we could push it out, but we just have the column to show, because we need to have column to make it look like a gable, symmetrical. Otherwise, we only have one column at the corner of the house. So that column is also serving as a structural column because we don't have the support for that corner. So yeah, I think I agree that we could have a conditional approval that push it back maybe halfway. So and then also make the gable a little bit thinner. We don't need that thick of the roof rafter, so it will be less, I think, in the look, right?
What you're talking about right now, would that pull the front of the porch back past that bay window?
Yes, past the bay window, yeah.
Including the columns as well?
The column will be just sit at the face of the wall.
The sort of squared off corners or the bay? Which face of the building? The bay is sort of proud of the
Right, the
primary
bay
wall?
will stay, right? So we only have the column right in front of the front wall. Do you think it will work? Because we make some observation of the neighborhood. Some porches, they do sticks out like that. Yeah.
I mean, I would also be, first of all, I don't feel like it necessarily needs to have a gable. I mean, I hate sort of doing design on the fly up here from the dais. I don't think that
Right.
ever results in the best architecture.
Yeah.
I think to me, I mean, I would be comfortable if there's, you know, if we do take action tonight on this, sort of delegating maybe to staff about working with you on a revised porch design, maybe with some principles that we could set about, you know, there not being features sort of forward of that front wall of the existing home, and kind of figuring out whether that's with a gable, without a gable, with columns, without columns,
Okay.
door orientation change, whatever that is, but to maybe let you guys work it out in a more collaborative,
Okay. Yeah, it's
sort of
possible.
professional setting rather
Right,
than up
right.
here on the phone.
Yeah, yeah. If total, we are okay without the gable and then just have the corner columns. So actually, it works better for structure. We just want to make it more interesting. Maybe we overdo it. Yeah. So
you're saying instead of a gable, you have a pitched roof?
yeah, we could have a single pitch roof out for some shading or some, just show that is the entrance.
Just like a shed roof.
Yeah, there's a shed roof.
Or even
What do you think? Or the shed roof turn around.
relatively
So
flat.
Many different way. Or a chalice with some wine growing up, flowers. So yeah, as far as we have some direction from you, I'm so willing to work with that.
Do other folks up here have thoughts about the massing and where sort of the height, the gable, the setback, any of that?
Could you go back to the floor plan, the front plan? I mean, I think if the entry would be, yeah, could you go, like, see the bottom of the page where the front door is?
So this we can eliminate this.
I think if there's nothing really beyond line A, I think that would look better.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, I mean, the steps can go up to it, but I think just, yeah, leaving that whole roof of the entry behind line A, and the column could be on line A. I would be happy with that and letting staff work out some different pitches of roof and.
Yeah. One thing, just to add for the commission, the plans indicate a first floor height. There's an existing first floor height of 8'6". They're intending to increase that interior ceiling height to 9'6". So, you know, if you want to bring down the volume of the building, there is some flexibility there, because you'd still have obviously legal ceiling height in that first floor.
The main floor, the first floor, 8'6" is what is existing?
Exactly. Yeah.
And they were going to go to 9?
They're going to 9'6".
9'6". That's also a structural engineering problem unless you redo all your walls. Or is that the plan, to take down all the walls? Or
We have done something like that. We just put 4x12 on top of the existing uprates there. Yeah.
okay, well, if your structural engineer approves that.
I mean, I do think bringing down every little bit that this can be brought down, 'cause, I mean, I think one of the issues I'm struggling with is it feels still a little top-heavy. And I think because it's growing in width and growing in height so much, it's starting to feel like top-heavy on this. And I feel like maybe if it was brought down a foot, I mean, then you're going to have some issue with the conflict of the existing gable with that window in the center. So there's going to need to be a little bit of redesign and additional thought on that window pattern. I think that proportion might feel a little bit better to sort of get rid of a little bit of that extra space up there, especially if that then is maybe instead of doing an additional setback or something like that, and kind of you still preserve your floor plan.
What is the second floor ceiling height? I guess I didn't see that. 8 foot?
8 feet.
Yeah, so that's okay.
The ceiling height is, in the first floor is only 8'6". From first floor to second floor is 9'6", but you got the,
It's the floor height.
right, so you got the 1 foot.
Floor is 9'6". The ceiling height actually is maintained 8'6".
Yeah.
So we didn't increase the ceiling height. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to start, I mean, you guys comment, but to me, it's just pushing back the porch just a little bit so it's not so proud of the building. It would solve any issues I have with the structure. And not even all the way back to the A-line, but back to at least flush with the front of the bay would be enough for me. I do like the articulation. I don't want to just have you take that out and put a pitched roof in it.
Yeah.
There's-
Okay, I agree. Okay.
Yeah, I think I'm on the same page as Commissioner Kent. And I think if, you know, if we were designing this from the dais, I might want to see that massing brought down on the second floor. But I think that this project meets our criteria to approve with the change to the deck that we've been talking about. So I think I would be prepared to make a motion to approve with the added condition that the applicant work with staff to finalize a design that brings the front porch back behind. I don't know how we're officially describing this.
Line A.
Line A.
No more,
on the
yeah,
plans.
the roof and structure behind, or the wall, the exterior wall to line A, and no. Yeah, there's still plenty of room for an entry with stairs there, if that's all. Yeah.
The problem if it goes back to A, you lose the column. The column becomes part of the building, you only have one column.
Well, they can be,
You should do some faux column in there.
do like an engaged column in the corner, and, I mean, one column's okay, too. I mean, it's
Yeah, it's true.
one arm holding it up. I don't know, it's, maybe there's other design principles you're thinking of, but well, I'd be fine with what you're suggesting.
All right, well, I guess to move this forward, I will make the motion that I just described a moment
Which
ago
was what again? Please.
without repeating it.
Would you please repeat it?
Do you want me to?
Yeah.
Okay. I would move that we approve planning application 19036 with the added condition that the applicant work with staff and obtain staff approval for a modified front porch design that pulls the, sorry, I don't have the lingo, that pulls the,
We actually
Structure of
crafted
the-
something.
Structure of the
Yeah,
porch
yeah,
back to
structure
line
of the
A,
porch
structure
back.
and
Yeah,
wall
pushes the
back.
front porch back to line A on sheet A21 of the plan set.
right.
So I would like to nix the line A, but pulls it back to a point that aesthetically brings forth the gable. Because I think pushing it back to A, I don't know if that's,
Well, yeah, I think what's important to me is that staff reviews and it reaches a conclusion that the revised proposal satisfies, the intent of Albany's design guidelines. And I guess if it becomes too difficult to work that out at the staff level, or, I don't think this is going to happen, but if they come back with something that seems like it's not in keeping with the intent of what we're talking about, then, perhaps it needs to come back again. But I think this is within the realm of things that, the applicant can think creatively about and take back to staff, and they can review in their professional judgment.
right, because A might be the place, but I don't want to make it a hard line, that's all, yeah.
That's fine.
Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Seeing none. Okay, with that condition, passes 4-0. Thank you. And I would say, please talk with your neighbors here also about the lead paint during construction to make sure it all goes smoothly. And just as a reminder, the story poles should stay up for 14 days through the appeal period. All right. With that, I need to refine the agenda. Oops, here we go. That takes us on to item 7 for new business. Item 7-1, Senate Bill 2, Building Homes and Job Act.
Yeah, so
Receiving a report.
Yeah, this is really more just an informational update for the commission. We are eligible as jurisdiction for up to $160,000 in housing funds through the State Department of Housing and.
Could I just ask you guys to take your conversation out into the hallway? Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
It's a $160,000 grant through the State Department of Housing and Community Development that's specifically earmarked for housing unit creation, facilitation. It's up to the jurisdiction how they intend to craft policies that will facilitate new residential construction. So we've gone to council twice. We got some clarity the second time around. So what the commission will be working on over the course of the next year, kind of broad brushstroke, is general plan and housing element implementation policies that relate directly to housing. So this will be zoning ordinance updates, general plan amendments, and some enhanced development standards as part of that, as well as objective design guidelines. So we'll be working with Urban Field Design Studio, which is an urban design firm, and Jean Iceberg, who you've seen here on, well, at the last meeting. She'll be the lead on that. We anticipate taking that through in 2020. And once that work concludes, separate from our grant, the City Council has given us direction to turn that into a specific plan. So this first phase will encompass the commission working on that plan implementation and policies. So I just wanted to affirm, though, for the commission that its truest intent is really to facilitate housing unit creation and development. So it's not public works infrastructure, it's not transportation, it is strictly earmarked for housing, and that's why it's administered by Housing and Community Development.
When does the city encumber the funds?
So, interesting question. I think it won't be too long. I think HCD had a little bit of, I don't know how to say this diplomatically, but basically we went to a workshop at MTC in May that made it seem like you could start tomorrow. We would just want to give you the money. And there were several cities in California that applied that did not make it. And I think there was a little bit of a disconnect in terms of sort of their expectations and then what jurisdictions are supposed to provide. So we actually are working with PlaceWorks, who's contracted with the state. So they do basically a review of the application before it goes on to HCD. The official deadline is November for that first round of funding, but we've been in contact with them. So I think we'll get the money probably in the next maybe month or so. Somewhere thereabouts. Yeah.
I thought it was pretty automatic we would get the money.
Yeah, it's automatic that you get the money, but you still have to go through the application process.
But are they refusing some applications or saying?
So
what you said?
That's an interesting question. An ABAG planner told us that all the applications were rejected, and PlaceWorks said, well, that was an unfortunate choice of words. It's actually like, you submit a housing element for comments, and that's really what it was the first round of applications all got kicked back with comments, and so additional detail was provided. And I think what the real issue was what was represented to the local staff was that it was really more a qualitative assessment, and HCD was actually looking for more of a quantitative assessment. So that was actually the kind of the lot that we landed in was, well, we understand qualitatively what you're doing, but you actually have to show what is the potential housing unit capacity.
This is just presented as an informational
This
item,
is just
right?
informational, just to let you know that this will be one of your big projects
Cool.
in the near future.
So it's not transportation, but it's intimately linked to transportation. It's intimately linked to, climate action plan. I mean, there's all sorts of elements to it, but.
But for the intents and purposes of satisfying this grant, it's going to be amendments to our zoning code. I mean, that's really going to be the bulk of it.
We're actually looking at the whole city for that, right? Or for the amendments to the zoning code. I know there's a specific plan, but in general, we're looking at the whole.
We're looking primarily at San Pablo Avenue.
Okay. And what about the PDAs? How are they going to integrate with this plan? I mean, that's also part of our work plan.
Right. So basically, what we're doing is really a local mechanism, and then the PDAs, they're kind of on a separate track with ABAG, MTC. They are linked, but it's part of more of a regional effort. And so this is the type of thing, once we have these changes in place, we can incorporate that into our PDA.
So the specific plan won't address anything in the R3 strips on the backside?
It's not intended to at this point. That wasn't the direction that we got from council.
And there's no kind of upzoning of anything on the outside edges of this? Or, I mean, there's some provision for through lots on San Pablo and one of the code things I read, but I'm just trying to figure out where
Right.
where it stops and.
I think right now, the intent is to take the frontage along San Pablo Avenue back to where the SPC San Pablo commercial zoning terminates.
Okay.
Any other questions or comments? All right. We will close that item and move on to announcements, communication, and discussion.
I don't have anything.
All right. I'll just say for the record, I passed out these neat maps that a family friend of mine, Fred Etzel, prepared as part for the Solano stroll that are just some neat old historical maps of Solano with some old photos of some landmarks from the Albany end of Solano all the way up to the top end of Solano. So as part of an effort with the Berkeley Historical Society. So anyhow, just pass those out for all of the
One
commissioners.
announcement that may be of interest. I've been invited to be a part of what's called the Integrated Sustainable Design Committee for the school district.
Oh, for Albany.
Yeah, the Albany School District. So there are I think there are 5 members, 4 or 5 members, and it's kind of an informal review board that gives input to the school district on not just new construction, but also continuing maintenance and other issues. So the big thing coming up is the Marin School redesign. So I'll be looking at, with the other people involved, the proposals from the design build companies and providing some feedback. They're all closed sessions, so I can't share any specifics. But at some point, it would be nice to have some sort of interaction from the school district with what they're proposing with the commission, and maybe that can happen at some point. But,
Yeah, would that happen, or is that just bypass local review?
I'm sorry,
The school district, when they do review like their school project, that never came through the commission.
right, they're subject to the requirements of the division of the state architect, so they bypass local regulations and control, typically.
but it has a huge impact on the city, and what they do is, pretty important. So anyway, I'll see how that goes, and if I can give you reports, I'll do that occasionally, or updates.
Okay, great.
Right, yeah.
That then, next meeting, and it looks like on the agenda it says still today's date.
Oh.
But next meeting is
October 9th.
October 9th, and with that, we're adjourned.
All right, thank you very much.
I mean, there's no way they could have been designed what do you mean?
They're the public schools.
Yeah, right.
Well, it's a record, almost.
Look like they were very heavily influenced by the design in Piedmont.
Interesting.
Can't imagine her job where she gets these.
Are they new?
Havens